All right, welcome to the Journeymen podcast. We are back after a little bit of a hiatus. Speaking is Brant Evans of Journeymen Asheville. I'm the director there, and I'm joined today by Jordan Bowman and Jacob Humphreys, both of Journeymen Triangle. You guys want to say a little bit about your roles and kind of maybe, I know we're going to get into it more deeply, but just a quick soundbite around your relationship to this work, if you don't mind. Jordan, how about you?
Yeah. Jordan Bowman, executive director here at Journeymen Triangle. I've been engaged in this work since 2009, when I went through as an initiate, as a J-man in the program, and stuck around. So that's me. What about you, Jake?
Yeah, pretty similar story. Went through in 2011 through the Rites of Passage weekend. Remained in the program till I was 18, started volunteering, joined the board for a couple of years, and now the program director for the program here in Raleigh. Yeah, love being a part of this work and glad to be here.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Just to give listeners kind of a roadmap for this conversation, we're definitely going to dive into this transition from being mentored to taking on the mentor role, which is, if anyone's familiar with boys' work, oftentimes there's a loss of contact with guys around that 17, 18, 19-year-old range. And it's a pretty real problem that we see in terms of completing this like mentorship lineage that I believe is extremely valuable. So that's going to be a thrust of the conversation. I guess I want to give you guys a chance to answer the the stock question, Jordan, that you and I have thrown out to the guests that we've had in the past, where can you guys take a minute and just speak to what mentorship looked like for you when you were younger? Obviously, J-Man plays a role in it, but in general, first memories of that healthy role model, that healthy mentor that actually took that time to connect with you and give you that gift of mentorship.
Yeah, I'll start us off here. So for me, it looked like a friend of mine who I had known for a few years. He's an older guy. I called him a friend because he, I identify with his friend now, but he's still a mentor of mine. And it was a combination of him showing an interest in me and like labeling that he saw something in me that he wanted to call out more, kind of seeing my potential, and not letting me skate by um, without capitalizing on that potential. So he didn't just call it out and say like, "Hey, I see this in you." He would call it out and say, "Hey, I see this in you." And then when I was open to feedback about, if I'm really making the right decision here, or if this was a good idea, or if I need, as he would call it, some old man wisdom, he would freely like dole that out and just tell me what he really thought, and shoot me straight. So for me, that's been a very grounding thing through the years, and that was kind of what, I guess, attracted me to him as a mentor, is that he was someone that wasn't gonna bullshit me on stuff like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll have to say that my dad's been a mentor in my life for sure. And when he introduced me to Journeyman, and I think I've talked about this in other podcasts, but it's one of the greatest gifts he could give me, in saying that, like, hey, I'm your dad and I'm going to teach you things, but I don't know everything. And here's a community of men who are conscious, living in integrity. Like, you'll find the people that you need to connect with here. And so, for me, I think I've had an orientation to life where I've always wanted to be the youngest person in the room. So I've recognized this necessity for eldership and wisdom and mentorship. And I think in some ways that came from Journeyman, from realizing, like, here's a community of dudes who have their shit together, or are okay with not having their shit together. Like, they are presenting a version of what it means to be a man that I'm like, oh, yeah, I want that. And so I've drawn on that community quite a bit, reaching out to specific people and saying, hey, can you mentor me in the ways of the Sweat Lodge, or can you mentor me in the ways of, business, or whatever it is. So I guess I'm speaking more generally, to having access to many mentors. But there's a solid like 3 or 4 that have been a solid thread through my life that I can go to, who've kind of done life with me. And it's been a grounding presence, and it's been kind of inspiring and aspirational.
Yeah. So both of you strike me as guys who have been pretty in touch with having that mentorship early on, which I think, leaves its marks. I think there are clues that get left when there's that mentorship that is happening for a boy. Were there periods where you wish you would have had more mentorship and none appeared? Or do both of you guys feel like you had a pretty nice continuity of mentorship once you were able to kind of take it in?
Yeah, it's a good question. Something probably I haven't contemplated before, if there have been places like that. I think for me, the lack of mentorship wasn't really there. It was more just something that I realized over, after a few years of being involved, is that just because I have mentors doesn't mean my life is easy. And so like I had this thought of like, oh, I'm in this program, I'm surrounded by, peers my age that, I can lean on, and older guys that I can lean on. And so I had this thought of like, oh, well, I should be set now. But life was still hard, and I was still going through, some trials and some shit. And so I guess that's not really answering your question, but I can't remember gaps where I didn't have mentoring, but that doesn't mean that life wasn't still hard.
It makes me wonder, it makes me think about how life is probably overbearingly difficult for people who don't actually have some of the supports. I mean, obviously that's one of the reasons why we're in this work, is to connect boys with that. What about you, Jordan?
Yeah, I didn't have a lack of mentors, and I feel blessed and privileged for that, but I rejected it. So there was a long time where it was like, yeah, like I don't know about these guys, like there's this kind of quacky group of men who like talk about their feelings, and I go twice a month to this group, right? So 16 years old, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna go because I have some friends here, like Jake and some of my other brothers are like, I want to hang out with them, I want to play some games, but I don't know how I feel about these people as mentors. And so to me, there was resistance personally. And I thought kind of I had my shit figured out, and like, whatever, like I'm a teenager, I'm on top of the world. And so I didn't reach out to the support when I could have, but having that consistency, like having them there, even when I didn't reach out. And then eventually when I needed help, I trusted them and I knew they were there. So I think the only lack of mentorship for me has been not taking advantage of it, like my own resistance to asking for help.
Yeah, because it is difficult to actually ask for help. Like I recognize that to be true of myself too. Like sometimes I want to, show myself that I have it all together and I can just handle things on my own. So yeah, that makes sense.
So Jordan, was stuff kind of seeping through there, and maybe into like the unconscious still, or was it, how effective do you think that wall was for you?
Yeah, I think stuff was seeping through. I mean, I think I was showing up with the mask, right? Like I was showing up with this front of like, I've got it together, but there was something that drew me back to keep coming back. So yeah, absolutely, there was stuff seeping through.
Right on. I guess I want to talk a little bit about, I think it's a fun kind of piece to contemplate. Like, what are the marks that we see in general? And maybe I can give you guys some blessings even to start it off around. What are the marks of a man who's had appropriate mentorship? As we're seeing, you guys are kind of in your mid-20s, and that's mostly been intact. We deal with mentors and adults, obviously, in just general life, who either have or haven't had some of that. I would contend that there are certain clues that get left behind. So what I see in both of you guys is first of all, like a grounded sense of this idea that your perspective carries weight. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces of both self-esteem, and also that can be transmitted to a boy when you're taking the time as a man to just be there for them. the implication is that there's value in who they are, what they think, their experience, right? Otherwise, why would all these awesome dudes in the community be putting in their investment into that? So I think that's part of the story that gets told, and definitely something that strikes me in both of you guys, where I don't think I think the norm in our culture is dealing with broken men, if I'm honest, who are riddled with self-doubt, not just that normal self-doubt that we all have at some level, but are really afraid to assertively stand up and say and stand by their opinion, own the things that they want, own it when they don't agree with what's going on around them. And so to me, that's one of the biggest clues that I definitely see in both of you guys. I'm curious about your thoughts. Like, what are some of the marks of a man who's been mentored as opposed to somebody who has not gotten that experience?
Yeah, I mean, like confidence, self-esteem.
Interesting, because I have to like take a step outside of myself and look back. Yeah, confidence for sure. What you said, Brent, about like what's the words I'm looking for here? So it's like the unknown, unconscious message that's being portrayed when all these guys actually invest time in me, that I kind of just end up thinking like, oh, well, I must be worth investing time in. That's just kind of like the 2 + 2 4 equation that my brain puts together. I think it's thought. Sorry, am I kind of tripping out here on the connection?
Yeah, it's going in and out.
Gotcha. Can you still hear me all right?
Yeah, we had you up to the 2 + 2 = 4 equation.
Yeah. So and eventually that unconscious equation in my mind, I think, came more to the forefront. And along with that, like I think having adequate humility. So it's confidence and humility, I think, are the 2 main things for me, that I see as like being markers of people who've had men invest in their life from an early age. Because I get to be in these situations where I have the possibility to fail, and so the more often I fail, the more often I realize my own humanity, and also being in settings where I can receive like honest feedback from those around me. And we do like a process that we call like a clearing, where it's like we get to two guys get to, and it's not restricted to guys, I just, my experiences with doing it with guys, but it's 2 people get to address a problem that they have with each other, or maybe with one person has with another person, and really label like what emotions are going on for them, what judgments are going on for them, and we get to all work it out in a way that's in the middle of the circle of the community, in a really meaningful way. And I think that process in and of itself has provided me with some really good humility, because I've been able to experience how my behavior can impact others, and also experience how susceptible I am to getting carried away with my own emotions and judgments, and losing sight of the truth.
So thanks for that, Jake. Yeah, I agree. I think for me, actually, I dug up these photos. So we used to, at the Rites of Passage weekend, we used to take a before and after photo. So that's me when I was 14, figuring out like, what is this weekend about? And then this me afterwards at the end of the weekend, right? And so before and after at the Rites of Passage weekend, I think the biggest thing for me was I still remember the work I did on that weekend 11 years ago. And it was around feeling like my problems don't matter, and feeling like I put the weight of the world on my shoulders. And so sitting in a circle, right? We have these talismans, and we talk about, the outer circle is our community, and the inner circle is the group of initiates, or the group of boys going through the weekend. And we physically represented that on the weekend, where the initiates stood in the middle facing out, and the community of men stood on the outside facing in. And the message I received in my bones in that moment was like, you matter. right? Just 50 dudes showed up, paid money to be there, left their jobs, their kids, you know, their wives to come and support me. It's like just it's just powerful, man. Just even being there beyond everything else we did. Like we did processes, we did things that were helpful. I got tools, but just the fact that they would show up and say, hey, like you are doing something important here. You are transitioning to adolescence, transitioning to a journeyman. You will become a man. Here is the marking of the beginning of this journey. I learned that my pain matters and that they weren't going to take it, and that I was going to be able to learn to turn that pain into a gift and bring it back. And so to me, that's the biggest thing. Everything else on top of that's just icing on the cake.
Yeah, that's, man, what is that from? What you just said. Oh my gosh, it's either a movie or something where there was, oh
Think about
man.
pain into a gift.
Yeah, no, it was this piece around like, I'm afraid you're going to take away my pain or something. And then the response was like, could I even, kind of thing. And it's going to come to me later, but it's like, it's a really powerful moment. You know, I wonder how like universal that experience is that you're talking to, Jordan. Cool. Well, you know, I appreciate you guys sharing that. Another trait that I want to throw in that I do think both of you guys embody is, to me, a man who's been appropriately mentored throughout his life tends to lean into the problems that are coming at them rather than shy away. I think there's like a general attitude and stance towards challenge and pain and difficulty. You know, when your expectation is that you've had that support in the past and that you've gotten through those difficult things and had mentors and people who help guide you, then it doesn't seem as scary to like lean into it. Doesn't mean doesn't mean that's always the case, but I know so many people, I've met so many people that are terrified of that pain and that challenge, and the response is to withdraw. And so I think one of the markings again of a properly initiated man, a properly mentored man who was a boy, is that sense of leaning into life and the difficulties. Yeah. You guys cool if I transition to that other big question?
Sure.
Real quick before you go there, on the piece about leaning into challenges and hardship. Like I just wanted to say, like, it's my belief that like everybody has the capacity to do that, or at least some capacity to do that. And I think the only difference that separates like me and Jordan from, I guess, the status quo is that we happen to have people that showed us early on our own capacity to do that. But I want to make it clear, like, they didn't add on to our capacity. Like it was our capacity that was innate. That they just kind of like showed us the door to. I think that's like a really key piece to label that mentors do. It's really just like showing people the door.
Yeah. Well, and Jake, you just kind of made an example of yourself, right? Because someone who's been menteed or mentored does what you just did. We said, no, this is mine. Like I can own this. And they helped me. So I thought that was kind of ironic as well. Yeah, that's another trait. And I will say, like, there's this piece of like, I felt like I was given a pen and the message was like, you're the author of your life. Like you're responsible and you don't have to do it alone. That changed my orientation to life, knowing that I had that support. Like I'm going to take more risks. I'm going to face my challenges.
Interesting. Yeah. That's
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. It's that thing of like, can't take away the pain if we tried, sort of deal.
And like, wouldn't want to.
Yeah. Well, some people want to, but I don't think they can. Or if they do, it's unhealthy and it doesn't serve the person to take that away.
Yeah.
Because the pain, like you said, the pain is a teacher. Pain can turn into a gift, and like taking that away from someone is like taking the gift away.
Yeah, I want to, and I know I ought not to.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Cool. You guys are right if I ask a little bit about kind of this idea of the continuity of mentorship and where that ends up being a typical stumbling block, I think, in programs, and kind of that lost boy age of 18, 19, 20. We good to move
I don't
there?
know, man. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I'm super passionate about that.
Well, can we start with just you guys talking about what went right for you to stay involved?
You want me to go
You want
first?
to take this one?
Yeah. So, there's a couple things. I think the first thing is the role of the mentor, which happened in my circumstance, was that they saw something in me before I saw it in myself. And the mentors and the men in my community said, "Dude, you got something, and to move towards that, we're going to give you more responsibility, and we're going to give you a place to fail if you need to." So that was there. I would say there was also an intrinsic kind of value for me. So I'll tell a little bit story about the bus. So at Camp Arrowhead, where we did our rites of passage, they had this bus that they converted into bunks. And the leaders at the time had this great idea. Good idea, John. I hope you listen to this. That we're going to put all the J-men in the bus. All the boys who have initiated in our program and come back to staff. We're going to just throw them all in the bus. And it got wild in there, man. Like, it was like fart jokes and like games all night. We were up till super late. And then like we weren't engaged the next day.
Yeah.
Right. And we fell into this like, oh, typical teenagers, like tired, not plugged in, not engaged. And so what I realized was like, hey, I'm seeing young leaders in the weekend, 20 somethings, and I'm saying, I want to be like them. And I don't think, messing around the whole time is the path to get there. And so there was an intrinsic knowing of like, okay, like that next ROPA, I set up my own tent. I left the bus. Like, I broke the rules at the time because I kind of could see what was happening. And Jake did the same, and Charlie did the same. If you fast forward 3 years, the three of us are invited to a ROPA leadership conference or summit or whatever, where we're exploring, okay, what's going well, what's not going well. And we see the problem of J-men aren't engaged. And then we propose a solution of, hey, we need to create a J-men coordinator role where we can have someone in their 20s work with the journeymen and have them stay plugged in, like give them roles and responsibilities, because that's what I wanted, right? That's what I wanted when I was younger, and later figured out, okay, I'm gonna make it happen. What I needed as a teenager, I'm gonna create for the next generation of teenagers. And so that piece was extremely important. The leaders in the group at the time said, yeah, run with it. And they gave me the responsibility, and they gave me a place to try it out. And we tried it out for a couple years, or for, I guess, a year and a half. So yeah, I think, so that story, like there being some intrinsic kind of like, hey, motivation, I want to be a leader, right? And then people seeing it and then rewarding it, engaging me. Then the other piece of like seeing something in myself before I saw it. And the third piece for me, I think, is around, well, it's really just giving me more leadership. So one of the things that happened is I came on as part-time staff to help be the registrar for the weekend. So there was a financial incentive, right? In that age range, I was like, having a paycheck attached to it made it more important in my life when I'm like, just got a car, like I'm thinking about college, money's really important to me. So those are kind of the three things that I think worked for me and allowed me to stay plugged in. I almost forget the original question, but
yeah. What went right for you transitioning through those years where boys kind of graduate out and then
they invited me to the board. It was a perfect storm. ROPA Leadership Conference, and I presented a solution there. I was invited to join the board of directors, and I was brought on as paid staff for Journeymen Asheville.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea about the having a really young, like 18-year-old board member. Some representation there. That's pretty cool.
I think it's necessary. We don't actually have a younger board member.
We don't.
I would like to get one. Like we gotta have youth at the center. Like we gotta lead from that place.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to. If I take nothing else from this, I need to remember that. Okay. Jake, where'd you go?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to keep knocking off my video here because the internet connection keeps kind of being fuzzy. But we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Jordan, when you were talking, man, honestly, I was. It took me back to the time when I was like 15, 16, 17, yeah. So you were talking about like fart jokes and laughing till like 4 a.m. in the bus. And honestly, dude, that was a big part of what kept me interested. After I turned, 19 or 20, it was a different story.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, it was having the opportunity to not only be outside of my family, but to go out into the woods and to do it with a bunch of guys that I know well, and also have we do a joint rites of passage with the Raleigh and the Asheville crowd. And so like I get to meet these guys from Asheville twice a year, and I kind of, I did it multiple times. So I got to know the people over there. We'd go up there from guys in Raleigh, we'd all road trip about 3.5 hours up to Asheville. And it was this whole like weekend experience where I got to hang out with like 50 uncles and a bunch of brothers that were about my age, like maybe
Audio's getting a little funny, sounding like a Spangle song over
15 of those guys, and it's just this giant awesome. Oh yeah, still nothing.
I got you now. Yeah, you're good.
All right, where'd you lose me?
You're talking about the having basically connecting with a bunch of uncles and the guys and the fun factor, I think.
Yeah. So just having all that fun and all the jokes. I mean, I could tell a bunch of stories. A few were coming to mind of some fun times we had, but it was that we mixed that in with also being of service to the young boys who were coming through the rites of passage weekend, and like recognizing that we're all there for the same purpose. And like it's not like joking around and being mean like I feel like most like masculinity is. When it kind of goes to that direction, is like the jokes turn really mean pretty quick. But it was all like fun and playful, and we could kind of spar a little bit with humor, and we all knew that, or at least based on my observation, I never really had anyone say that it was harmful. Maybe we'll find that out later, but the guys that we were joking around with, like everybody was having a good time, and we were just hanging out and also being of service at the same time. So is that we talk about like the balance between sacred and silly. So being able to like be really real and talk about some real life shit that's going on in our life, or be there for someone else to talk about that. And then the next minute being able to like be silly and have fun and play.
Yeah.
And so I think that balance before I turned about 20, that's what kept me coming back. And then after I turned 20, it was that responsibility, that leadership. I got to actually lead the rites of passage weekends with Jordan and another friend of ours, Charlie. And so it was the responsibility afterwards that kept me involved. But at first I think it was being able to be so real and also so playful.
Gotcha.
Throughout the weekend.
Dude, I think about something that just kind of light bulb that went off for me, and I'm sure this isn't my original thought, but it's I don't think I'd crystallized it before, but I think there's something really valuable about that when you're with those group of guys and that teenager, and there's like this kind of like you mentioned, fun-lovingly poking fun at each other, It's like I see that as like how like lion cubs will play with each other. Like for boys, it's important to kind of develop your sense of humor and be able to hang and be able to, defend yourself a little bit. And that's like to kind of to go back and forth and have that edge.
Yeah.
There's a lot of suspicion towards that energy. There's a lot of impatience or intolerance towards kind of the rambunctious male teen, especially when it's such an important process, right? Like it can go awry. There's ways it can be toxic, and there should be some guidance and mentorship around some of that stuff. But man, just like to this day, when I'm with my close friends, we're like taking little fun shots at each other, and it's with love. And I think there's something about that kind of keeps you sharp.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, I guess what the other piece of this that I should say is that I sit in with people who are either tangentially or even directly involved in work like ours, who do not have a healthy respect for that type of interaction and that type of energy, who want things to go to a real vulnerable place 100% of the time and don't honor the humor and the fun and even the like little sparring sessions that come out of that. I think there's room and a beauty in that that's helpful developmentally.
Well, to me, it shows trust. Like I was reading the Book of Joy, Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, and they always like make fun of each other in the book. And what's awesome is that it's like, oh, I can do that because I trust you and I know that you love me and I know that like we're here and I can make fun of you and it's not like the end of the world. And so I think when there's trust lacking in those circles, that it's like, ooh, like we can't do that. Mm-hmm. So it
to me
speaks to the strength of the container. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, to me, it seems like finding boundaries. Like that's the phrase that comes up to me. So like, I want to find out where your boundaries are. I also want to find out like where my boundaries are. And like, I think for me, it's helpful to not take myself too seriously and to actually like realize like, oh, like I can take it a little crack at my expense. Like, and I'm okay still. Like, like I don't have to be wounded by something someone said that was meant in jest. And it kind of like, it lessens my ability to get offended. And that's like really helped me throughout other areas of my life when people actually do like they do say stuff that may be demeaning or directed at me. And like, I can actually kind of brush it off and be like, okay, that's about that person's stuff. And I don't have to really take that on or get in a whole big fuss about it. I found it to be like really useful. And also just the thing that got me the most engaged when I was younger.
In our friend group, we have this thing where if we're joking, and it goes too far, we say, hey, you found the line, now take a step back, right? Like, and so that constant negotiation of like, where is the line? And to have elders to be able to say, hey, like, yes, this is welcome, your boy energy is welcome, this rambunctious energy, we want that, that's necessary, it's necessary in adults, it's necessary in teenagers, but there's a line. And like how do we create that negotiation? Because developmentally, as a teenager, you're learning how you negotiate that with the larger culture and the larger society. And to do that in a microcosm of uncles and brothers and men who care about you and are walking this path of their own personal development of being conscious and having integrity. Super helpful.
Yeah. A good example of that is actually one of my mentors tells me a story about when his kids were younger and they would just say some obnoxious, rambunctious shit, like just trying to be inflammatory and, trying to make dad blush or make dad get angry or at something they said, because they were just having fun. It was like three brothers. And so the phrase he would always say would be like when they would say something really dark that, meant to be a joke, he would say, I'd see the humor in that, and not actually laugh, but just like recognize, like, I get you're trying to make a joke and like part of that's funny, but he wouldn't really give him the full satisfaction of laughing at it because he didn't really agree with what they were joking about and thought it was like past that line. And so, and of course they would always make fun of him like, oh, dad, you see the humor in this? But it was like a nice boundary to give them to be like, didn't shame them for trying to be funny.
Right.
That's, you know, they were kids. That's what they were trying to do. They were 11, 12 years old. But also didn't just give in and laugh and not say anything about it. Like, wanted to let them know, like, this is kind of fucked up. I get you're trying to be funny, and just kind of hold up that mirror for them. So I've been able to like apply that with the journeymen in the groups now, because some of the guys say some kind of like, every once in a while they'll kind of say some raunch stuff. I'm like, ooh, like, ew, how do I hold up the mirror here so they can see kind of the error in their own ways, rather than trying to just like shame them for it. Yeah.
There's a character in Seinfeld that like that always says, "Oh, that's so funny," and never laughs. I don't know. It just made me think of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about us as mentors in that role of holding a space where if we aren't secure in ourselves, then we don't really feel okay. Like if we don't know where the line is, then we do not feel okay about the boys kind of playing around and maybe like stepping a little bit over it. I learned that in wilderness therapy. It was like the good staff were the ones that knew they had the skill set to kind of swim in the deep waters, and so could allow the boys to go out a little bit farther. They didn't have to contain everything so much, because, you know, if you're able to let these guys drift a little bit in something that may be towing the line of appropriateness, but you let it kind of play out, and then like a boy emerges from the group and says, "Hey guys, like I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about this. Like, can we scale it back?" And then instead of being rescued by some caretaker, now they just stood up and self-regulated, and that's way more powerful than just having an authority figure come in and boom, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they learn how to take care of the community and take care of themselves. How do you guys see that translates over, that same dynamic translates over to other areas of people's lives?
Which dynamic? Just the
dynamic of like being able to let them, as a mentor, be okay with swimming in the deep waters and let them go out a little far. Like, how do you see that as playing out in other areas?
Yeah, like leadership, right? Like I think in a business, in leadership roles that I've either held or worked with in my not too long career, has been, there are some leaders that really struggle with giving license and letting people make appropriate mistakes, giving that latitude. I've also seen people like almost neglectful leaders who kind of like don't regulate that, but then come in a storm like twice a year and are scapegoaty and, you know, blamey and like, that creates a culture of anxiety and resentment really too. So I think these are the types of things that we learn in groups, are the types of things we are going to do in groups, whatever the setting is later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The kind of colloquial phrase is, people talk about, well, we need to create safe spaces for our youth. And like, some of the intention behind that I can get behind, but I think the word safe space isn't most accurate. I would rather use the word brave space, because it's not safe. Like what we do is not safe. Transition from childhood to adulthood is dangerous. People who don't transition, it becomes dangerous. People who do it in a way where they find belonging in a more extreme group, in a different set of values, is dangerous. And I think bravery is that component of, hey man, like I'm a little uncomfortable about this, right? Instead of just the helicoptering rescuing. So
there's that. This is a whole long debate. Jonathan Haidt talks a lot about this in some of his work around. He did the coddling of the American mind, which I haven't finished yet, but just, you know, the great untruth is what he calls it, of what doesn't kill us makes us weaker, that kind of mentality. It's like you know, you're gonna have some scars in your life, and fostering resilience, all that stuff. I mean, it's required skill set if you're gonna functionally navigate this just chaotic world that we live in. There's no way around it.
Yeah, and like it's kind of goes along with the whole debate. I know me and Jordan, we talked about this a little bit, but just for you, Brant, like we talk about the moving, how to move from like dependence to independence to interdependence, and like how I mean that's why kids who are sheltered by their parents and, are still living at home when they're 24 and haven't started college yet, or, just don't really have a direction in life and not really any motivation to get out of the house because they haven't been given the opportunity to get some of those scars. And so a new scar is really terrifying to them.
Yeah. If you don't have the confidence to clean up a mess you make, you're going to try to never experience that messiness.
Yeah. So that's what I was thinking, like, about letting them kind of go wander out there in their humor. Kind of reflects what we also do with them in other areas of the work, is like letting them try leading something and, like, give them the tools and help prepare them, but like let them fail at it so they can learn.
Right.
Not set them up to fail, but if it happens, let it happen.
Yeah.
And and also in even in school, or like if a guy's at group talking about like an interaction with his parent, and he's really like disagreeing with his parent and wants to figure out a way to make amends, and got his phone taken away, and I don't call up his parent afterward and I'm like, hey, like, let's set up something between you and your son to kind of make amends around this. Like, if it's really extreme and there's just some sort of like violence happening, we might call them up. But like, if it's just like a disagreement, then we try to figure out how to empower the young man to handle that himself, because he can. And if he kind of messes it up, then that's okay, and he'll learn from it. Like, I know that was important for me, is to just be able to like just give things a shot and just see what happens. And then after a while I learned like what worked and what didn't work in various situations. But even more important, I learned that I can just give things a shot, and sometimes they'll come out all right.
Yeah, a lot of it is caught, not taught, right? Like, we create the environment for emergence, for them to learn these things, test these things out. And I think just to kind of bring it back to the leadership development piece, and how to basically continue an intact lineage of this work, the role of elders. I don't think we would be able to have this conversation without speaking to the role of elders.
Right.
The necessity for even our leadership team on the row pause. We have an elder council, right? They have the ability to check us and say, hey, you are responsible for the weekend and for doing this, but like, you don't do that in a vacuum. And I've been exploring this idea quite a bit. I think, what's his name? Jamie Wheel talks about it a little bit. The importance of lineages being intact, and being the importance of tradition, right? Like, you don't need to be completely bound by it, but you need to be accountable to it. And so having that group of elders, and to be able to say, hey, like, they're there to make sure, to let us fail in some ways,
right,
but to also make sure we're doing it in a way that's responsible and like legit. You see the worst like cults happen when people basically say, oh, I'm a new covenant now, we're gonna do our own thing, we're not bound by any of this tradition. So it's finding that balance of, how do I respect that and really respect the energy of elders in the work, but also to an extent where it's stifling, I guess.
Cool. Well, I want to get us back a little bit to also the piece around those lost years. And I know that that's a bigger topic that we're not going to solve right now, but you guys talked a little bit about what kept you engaged. I'm curious about your thoughts for, and I guess you feel free to take it either way, but two things rattling around in my head is what are the pieces that fall apart for guys usually around that age? And what can be done about it? And when I say fall apart,
Like,
that sounds dramatic. I mean, what I mean is, just in terms the incentives or the disincentives around engaging in this process of being in a men's group, being in a boys group. I mean, they're moving into the men's group, like making that leap of staying involved with a mentor and a connected mindset into the intentional masculine community.
Yeah. And are you talking about like around age like 17, 18, 19, kind of that area? Okay. Yeah, well, I think first thing that comes up for me is if they were involved in this work early on, say they come into the program at 13 or 12, 14, around there, by the time they reach 18 years old, they kind of think like they identify this is the thing that was part of their late middle school / high school time of life. And so they're moving on from high school. Most of the time they're kind of like leaving high school that time. And so entering into this new phase of life, and when entering into, I mean, if we compare it to the hero's journey, when entering into the new phase and crossing that threshold, the whole world seems to shift and nothing looks the same as it. So what comes up for me is that they probably won't view journeyman in the same way. I know I didn't, because things shifted. And all of a sudden the focus is less on me as an 18-year-old and more on the guys who are 14 and 15 and younger than me. And so if that isn't kind of a gradual transition, if it's sudden, sometimes it can be too jarring. And the idea of just being of service and not actually like getting something out of the work and being involved can probably be a big turnoff for some guys. Because they're still, something magic doesn't happen at 18 years old. So why should we make a magic transition at 18 years old, right? So I find it really useful to make that a gradual transition into leadership and into that that transcendent nature of sacrificing for the good of someone else, and teaching them that early on to prevent that sudden jolt from making them say, okay, I don't really want to be a part of this anymore if I'm just going to volunteer all the time. Because I know that's what would have happened for me. If I was 18, I was still getting a lot out of it when I returned as a mentor.
Right.
Because I was involved in meetings without the younger group of guys, and I was kind of more the focus of that, being the younger guy in the crowd. And so I still had many avenues where like I could get support easily. So yeah, I feel like I kind of over talked on that one, but
yeah. Well, to just kind of I think you identified some of the problems really well, Jake, and for me, so I can talk to my personal story, and then I can talk about a couple of prescriptions that I have for people who are doing this work. So there's this importance of, we talk about the hero's journey, and I think we really need to help the young men in our program see themselves as the hero in the hero's journey, but also see themselves as mentors and allies in other people's hero's journey, right? So they need to be able to zoom out and say, oh, like there are many layers to this. Like it is not all about me. When I come back to staff, it is about others, and there's a part of it for me.
Right.
So being clear on like what's in it for me, what's in it for others. In my life, I thought this work changed my life. Mm-hmm. Like this work absolutely changed the trajectory of who I am and what I did. And so I want to give this to as many people as possible. And that's what I'm doing. And I think I said that and I stated that, or maybe I didn't. Maybe other people just noticed it and it developed, right? There's another piece around.
Well, real quick, what you're saying is kind of congruent with what Jake was saying earlier, where we're recognizing even just in your hero's journey or in my hero's journey, like there is the return, and maybe there's more work we can be doing around shaping that return as an integral part of the journey. Because I think that's really where we're not like us necessarily, but us too. But in the mentorship world, I think that's where there's a lot of loss, is on the hero's journey. There's not a lot of return.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was actually what my other point was. So thanks I was losing it. I'm glad you put it there. Was that there can be the refusal of the return. Mm-hmm. People want to live in the special world, this ecstatic kind of experience. They don't want to come back to the mundane.
Right.
Or they don't feel like their gift is worthy enough, or they don't know what happens next. And so there's one thing we can do better, we meaning broadly rites of passage work, and also our organization, is create a better homecoming ceremony, create a better ritual to honor the transition. So we initiate young men onto their journey to becoming men, right? Journeymen. So we initiate them into their adolescent years where they're learning and developing. but we don't necessarily provide that initiation afterwards to say, okay, like you're an adult now, you're a man now. We don't do it in the group setting, where we really honor and recognize them and invite them back as a mentor or invite them into another level of learning.
Right.
I think we could improve that. We do it in some ways. We definitely don't have a process, written out for it or anything. But focusing back in on that, I think, is key.
Yeah, and like me and Jordan, I appreciate you asking some of these questions, Brant, because you're helping me and Jordan kind of uncover the path behind us a little bit. Because I think for some reason that I can't explain, we are where we are, and the torch has been passed to us to continue this work from our elders, and so we're trying to backtrack and figure out how to continue to pass that torch behind us.
Right.
Because even though we're 24 and 26, we're still pretty young, but we're not going to be doing this work forever either. And I want to, figure out how do we activate those 16, 17, 18-year-olds to start realizing like, oh, hey, I can actually do this. Like those guys up there leading this work, like they're really not so far from me as I think. How do we lessen that gap and still recognize that there is like a difference in our levels of experience, but it's not as vast as they may think.
Yeah. And it's, you and I, or us three, have talked about this. Like I'm 34, a little older than you guys. And it's the question of when you guys are in your 30s, like who are going to be the 20 something year olds that are holding that, which is slightly a different energy. There's no way that you guys can hold the same energy that you do now. It's going to develop. It's going to evolve. You're going to have a different presence when you're 30. Mm-hmm. And if we wait 20 years before we find another person to kind of plug into that, then we're, there's a loss there in my mind. Like if we don't have somebody who holds that space for each point in that progression, and it's like there's a missing link.
Yeah, I think I want to say one more thing on this piece, because I talked about it in the Boys to Men conference that I presented at. It was we talk about this piece of empowering J-men to be leaders and these younger guys to be leaders as if it's easy, and it is not easy. For me, as a really experienced facilitator and circle tender, I can sit here and like, I want to say, wait, I can do it better. It can be more right. It can go more deep. It can be more a great experience for these young men. But I have to like step outside of that and say, wait a minute, it's not about doing it right or perfect or good. It's about giving them an opportunity to maybe fail, and if they do fail forward, right? Yeah. And so that stepping from, okay, how do I be an elder here, right? Stepping from the doing to that next transition. So even in our communities, I think we have a lot of well-intentioned men who like still have shadow around wanting to be seen as having it together and wanting to be seen as being a great leader. And it can cause negative consequences, I think, because there's a rites of passage that happens from middle age to elderhood, right? Or to old age, and et cetera. And so really looking at how do we intentionally ritualize and recognize transitions from all stages of life is key to having that intact lineage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Well, gents, I think that's probably a good spot to end it. I really appreciate your insight. I think having these conversations is one of the ways we keep our understanding fluid and develop it. Some of this stuff comes from experience in the group. Some of it comes from, reading good material on it. And then to me, the third piece is just digging in with other people that are really into the work. So I'm feeling grateful. Yeah, I guess we'll do a checkout. We didn't do a check-in, but we'll do a checkout. And I'm feeling grateful, connected, and thoughtful and inspired. I'm out with that. What about you, Jake?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty grateful, and also just curious to know how many people who may listen to this and wondering how many people may actually take into heart like what was said here about inviting others into leadership and letting them fail and not feeling like they have to take ownership over the outcome of their actions. I know that really hits home for me as like something for me to work on. And so I just thought I would kind of label that just for anybody who's listening about, it is that it is possible to do that. And even though it's hard, it's like, it's work worth doing. Yeah. So I'm out with that.
Oh, Jordan. Yeah, I'm feeling jazzed. I'm feeling energized by the conversation. I feel sharper. It's always good to kind of cross paths with you men and kind of explore these concepts deeper, abstractly, but with real world consequences. So I'm feeling inspired. I'm feeling hopeful for the idea of maybe getting one of our young leaders on the next podcast. I think that would be super cool. So we're not just in a vacuum here.
Yeah, maybe even a panel. That'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just feeling like really live with this work. It's inspiring for me to know that I am the person that I needed. So it's healing to my own little boy. So really grateful for you men in this space.
Cool. Thanks, Jordan. If for anyone still listening, we can only do this work with the help of communities, and sometimes that looks like time. It also looks like money, which is a resource that we absolutely depend on, and makes some of these experiences, some of the workshops that we put on, and the rites of passage work possible. So if you find yourself in a position to be generous, there's it's journeymentriangle.org is yours. Is that right? Yeah. And ours is journeymenasheville.org. And, I think we were considering setting up a fund that was specifically more geared towards the podcast itself, which would be like a shared fund. I don't know if we've put that into place yet, but any amount is extremely helpful. And I would say that any amount just helps to keep that momentum going and help to keep this community presence going, which is, this work just does not happen without community presence, without the investment of both time and money from people who get the work, who care about it, and who want to see us move in a positive direction for our young men. So thank you for being a part, even just by listening. And we'll catch you next time.
Oh, awesome.